Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining the GTRI 10 Questions Asked During a Cloud Workshop webinar. We'll get started here in just a moment. A few people joining as we speak. And everyone's muted right now, but I will open this up at the end with about 15 minutes left. So at about 2 o'clock Mountain Time, I'll unmute everyone. You can ask some questions at that point if you'd like. And in the meantime, if you have a question, we'll just leave the mute on, but if you do have a question you want to send it through, feel free to use the Q&A panel or the just the chat window, either one. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks again for joining. My name is Andrew Tennant. I'm the Practice Director here at GTRI for our Hybrid IT and Cloud Practice. And today's discussion is around questions to ask during a cloud workshop. So the intention here is if you're having a broader discussion about cloud and the leverage of cloud in your organization, what are the best practices around engaging those cloud providers? What are the things you should be asking and you should be learning from anyone helping you in this space? I would count GTRI in that category as well. So these are things that we certainly spend a lot of time focusing on in our cloud workshops. But we'll just run through. And again, we'll spend time on each one. And at the end, if you have any questions, feel free to I'll have the lines opened up, and you can submit them via the Q&A or chat panel in the meantime. All right. So let's begin. We'll start with, I think, the most important piece in any cloud discussion, right, which is what's the motivation? Why is the organization considering the cloud to begin with? What is it about the cloud that is of appeal? Is it being demanded by the business? Is it because they see, the organization sees their peers doing it? Is it because an executive said, thou shalt go pursue the cloud? Is it because somebody like a Gartner or other research firm said you got to be doing it? It's important to understand the reason why. And it's not a cynical view, it's just an alignment view. You have to know what is driving it if you're going to have a successful outcome at the end of that journey. And I've seen this over and over where organizations may pursue it for reasons that aren't questioned. Somebody said go do it, so somebody runs off and does it. There's also the reality that in many cases the organization is already doing it, and by that I mean your company is already doing cloud, maybe in pockets. Maybe it's a line of business or function marketing, or the developers have already found that it's easier to go off to a public cloud, or they have gone ahead and procured a solution for human resources, for example, in the HR department that's a SaaS offering. That's another form of the same thing, which is this line of business decision-making around cloud. So whether it's responding to the fact that you see it going on around the organization, or if it's something that you just want to get ahead of, getting everyone on the same page as to what the expected benefits are going to be and why you're doing it, I think is important. And again, it's not a contrite rhetorical kind of thing. You're truly trying to figure out by person kind of what's in it for everyone. And when it comes to that, cost is often a motivator. We'll jump to number 2 here, actually, with regard to that. When it comes to the actual business outcome, what's the expectation there? Is it because it's quote-unquote cheaper or perceived to be that way, or is it the nature of that spend? Is it because cloud offers an OpEx model typically, whereas traditional captive IT is a capital expense? Maybe it's about agility. Maybe it's about being able to operate quickly and scale up and down and have elasticity as the cloud provides. That's certainly a common motivator and one that's quite beneficial. In some cases, it's just FOMO, or fear of missing out, right? Fear of missing out on what seems to be the prevalent trend out there. But it's, again, as part two of that alignment piece, it's crucial to have agreement on these expectations going into it, or the efficacy of getting there is going to be reduced, and the benefit at the end is going to be challenged if it doesn't meet someone's expectations. If you find, as you're going through this process, that someone thought it was going to be cheaper and lo and behold it's cost neutral, that could be successful in one regard but a failure in another. So I think asking yourselves and your peers, what are we trying to accomplish from a business perspective? No technology at all, just from a business outcome. What are we gaining by this? And what you'll find is that depending on what department you represent or what group you're in, everyone has a different opinion of that, of what that business outcome is going to be. Let's see. As far as cost, I will say that by and large, cost is probably not a terrific motivator. There are cases where it can certainly save money, depending on the nature of the workload you're looking at. And specifically, let's touch on public cloud for a moment. But I think actually the real financial benefit is opportunity. So while you might save money by doing it, the real plus is in enhanced opportunities or greater agility or greater business flexibility that is gained. Those monetary gains will far outweigh the quote-unquote cost savings that are part of the same picture. So keep that in mind. If it's viewed as simply a cheaper way of doing things, it's probably not going to enjoy the success that you're looking for in general. Question number 3, one that's very, very important to ask right up front, and specifically which of our applications make sense to move to the cloud and why. But even more broadly than that, we're exposing the fact that on its own, you can't just move stuff to the cloud and hope it will be better, right? And there are certain things that will do well in a cloud environment and certain things that won't. But by asking this question, you can begin the dialogue internally around the appropriateness of some of these applications for the cloud. Let me give you an example. If you have an application today that is performing poorly and it's cumbersome, it doesn't scale well, it's monolithic in that the architecture is kind of a very traditional architecture from a component perspective, from a software perspective, moving that to the cloud is not going to fix those things necessarily, right? Because just because the cloud itself has elasticity and scalability doesn't mean your application, if you lift it and shift it to the cloud, is going to be able to take advantage of that. So, and not a surprise, the appropriateness of any given software application to the cloud is something you must take into account. And I would go so far as to say this needs to be done before you get very far down the path at all. And part of this is an inventory of your applications, a dependency map of those applications so that you know which ones talk to the other ones, which ones are codependent on common things like databases, which ones have latency sensitivities. And the reason that you need to map this picture out before you actually begin any migration or any sort of cloud move is you run the risk of inadvertently taking a portion of a key application, potentially displacing it to a cloud for some perceived benefit, and yet an application dependent on it that remains back on your infrastructure suddenly struggles with poor latency, and now you've got to roll that whole thing back or or figure out how to get the rest of the application into the cloud. So mapping things out, knowing how things, what the dependencies are between your applications and within those applications, and really having a good working real-time sense of that is enormously important. Probably the most essential element to success or failure when it comes to cloud is understanding your applications. And at GTRI, we can help you with that. We do application portfolio assessments. We can help run through every app, soup to nuts, and help make recommendations on which ones can be moved readily to the cloud, which ones perhaps make more sense to be either redone or refactored prior to going to the cloud. Even those that simply need to be extinguished and reborn as something else because they don't provide the value that they are costing the organization. So legacy technical debt applications fit into that category. But in any case, this is a great time to sort of do spring cleaning on your applications and figure out what you need to keep around, what you need to focus on, and what you need to hand off to someone else to deal with. And I would say that, by the way, that applies to not only cloud in the form of, let's say, a public cloud moving the workload, but also even SaaS options for any of your core applications. If they're kind of parity or if you will, not differentiating applications to your core business, something like email, it's very important, but it's not making you more competitive than anyone else. That's a great place to look for SaaS alternatives to do those things. And when we say cloud ready, again, we're talking about architecturally, is that application in a position to take advantage of some of the benefits of cloud, like auto scaling and elasticity. If I have a monolithic app, the fact that the cloud can add more web servers at a moment's notice is only useful if the application can handle multiple web servers and statefully balance connections between all of those things at once. Question number 4. This is an important one to think of early on in the process. What skills are going to be needed to take greatest advantage of the cloud? And I phrase this in a very specific way, right? It's not just what skills do we need for the cloud, because there are corollaries to everything that we do in IT today that live in the cloud. There's sort of a nice, simple way to map some of those things. But if you want to do it well, and you really want to take advantage of the cloud and actually get an acceleration from your leverage of the cloud, that indeed may be more than a simple storage person takes on storage task, network person takes on network task. It may be, again, embracing a more end-to-end holistic view of the application delivery itself. Cloud isn't a free lunch. It's not going to make things better automatically. It's not going to fix process challenges that exist simply because you've moved it elsewhere, right? You're going to typically just move those to the, if you have a crap application that's running on your infrastructure today and you move it to Amazon, guess what? Now it's a crap application running in Amazon, and that's as much the technology as it is the people and process that go along with it. So assess the skills of the team and make sure that you're willing to let folks take the time necessary to kind of learn the new concepts, to learn how to take that advantage. It's got to be part of it. You can't just expect people to naturally change what they're doing and not have any training to get there. And we can help with that here at GTRI as well. All right, question number 5. What are the security concerns and can they be addressed? This has been an ongoing question from day one of certainly public cloud and many vertical and SaaS clouds as well. And I would say that it's an ever-changing but improving landscape. There is no legitimate concern with the security of a cloud today just because it's a cloud, right? Just because it's a public cloud doesn't mean that it inherently has to be less secure than something you're doing yourself. The tools are there, the techniques are there to secure the connectivity of that cloud, as well as the execution of the workloads in that cloud. but you still have to make sure you're addressing them. If you don't take the time to understand the mechanisms and implement them, back to the previous question around skills, if you're not actually addressing those, then it's all for naught, right? And there's no question that this is a sharp edged tool that can either be used for precision or it can cut you if you're not careful. So I will tell you that many of our customers find this the biggest challenge at the moment is getting cybersecurity folks who are skilled and knowledgeable in cloud security concerns. That particular area seems to be one of great dearth of talent in the market. So, leveraging your partners like a GTRI to come in and help shore that particular capability up, I think is important today. And some of the more important things, encryption's not necessarily a big thing. Security of data is not as big a deal. Multi-tenancy, maybe not as big a deal, but harder problems to solve, like data sovereignty, right? Back in the day, every jurisdiction, every locale typically has data sovereignty laws, and it was fine when you were doing business as a multinational, let's say, and you had data in multiple countries. You knew where it was and you knew how to deal with it. Potentially, if you go to the cloud monolithically, you don't necessarily know where that data is anymore, and the jurisdiction of that data sovereignty may fall under a country that you're not anticipating. And the model today for cloud providers is generally to place that burden on you, the end customer, to know, ask, research, and understand those various data sovereignty rules and regulations as they apply to each country in which your data resides. So something to keep in mind, your data may end up in a country you're not anticipating, and then you're responsible to make sure that it's being secured the way that you expect it to. Just something to keep in mind. For organizations just doing business here in the U.S., not a big deal, but if you have operations elsewhere, or if you find yourself with a cloud provider that's trying to give you a global footprint of cloud coverage, you may end up with this situation. Just ask about that. Likewise, industry-specific concerns. If you are a healthcare provider and you have concerns around things like HIPAA or other healthcare regulations, there are a variety of verticalized, specialized clouds where they differentiate now predominantly on their adherence and knowledge of those regulations. So one great direction to go in that case is, hey, we want to go to infrastructure as a service with somebody else other than our own internal assets, but we're a healthcare provider, so seek out a community vertical cloud like a healthcare cloud that specializes in that and can give you SLAs and contractual obligations around your industry-specific requirements. And then also make sure that you're looking at emergent technologies like a cloud access security broker. That's a technology that is meant to help alleviate many of the emergent security concerns related to cloud that continue to, it seems like every 6 months a new consideration comes up that needs to be addressed that wasn't a problem we had to deal with nearly as much in the past. When it comes to a cloud application security broker like a CASB, like a Cloud Lock or something like that is a product that Cisco has. This is for anything from ensuring policy and cohesion with that policy for any transactions to and from any of your cloud services. Those could be things like an Amazon Web Services, or they could be the use of a Dropbox or some other cloud application, for example. So tools are out there today. There's a tremendous and vital, a very vibrant industry of that in that marketplace. So make sure you're addressing that. On to question 6. What lessons have been learned from past experiences? We have a number of those that we shared in our first portion of this series. But I would say that the biggest one to echo today would be get alignment of the team and shared expectations of everyone involved, all stakeholders, both in technology and outside in the line of business, the ones who actually need the data or the application. And make sure that everyone's got the same level of commitment to moving in this direction, that they all have the same level of expectation and the same criteria for success. That's crucial, and that alignment is essential. And then second would be a relentless focus on the applications. At the end of the day, that's what should drive everything, is what is the application, what is it doing, and how can we do it most efficiently and effectively? And that will lead your cloud conversation most directly. Question 7, this comes in many flavors, but how can we avoid cloud lock, different than the cloud lock I mentioned a moment ago, which is a CASB solution from Cisco. This is cloud lock as in we moved our stuff to Amazon and now it's either too expensive or difficult to get it back out, right? Once you get there, you're kind of stuck. And this is a serious consideration and a question that you should ask right up front and understand going in eyes wide open. None of these issues that we're talking about here, by the way, are insurmountable. They're just more around being informed and knowing this going in. And I'll give you some simple, tangible examples. In the case, and I'll pick on Amazon only because they're certainly the most mature public cloud and well-known and terrific. They have lots of great capabilities. And they have a lot of great APIs, application programming interfaces, that are available to developers of all types, and boy, they love to take advantage of them. And that may seem wonderful. It's what they love about, quote unquote, the cloud. They can program stuff to happen and set up infrastructure and components on the fly very readily. That's all great. One caution, though, is that the more of those APIs that they become dependent upon, the deeper and stickier the relationship becomes with that cloud. So if I'm completely programming all of my software into the cloud through these APIs, and I decide elsewhere in the business that I want to consider a different cloud provider, those APIs are kind of part of the, I've really weaved a very tight web there I can't escape from. So the recommendation here might be strongly consider some abstraction layer between your organization and workloads and any and all clouds that you're leveraging. In fact, if you do it ideally, you can do it such that your own internal resources that are still depreciating and still on, in the picture, they're just seen as another cloud, right? They happen to be on your own gear. And then next to that is Amazon, maybe Azure, maybe Google, et cetera. And it lets you deal with all of them on an equal playing field. That becomes the simplest guard against cloud lock that there is, because you're not embracing all these very, very sticky APIs. That seems counterintuitive to many, but I would say I've seen it many times where the more of those APIs you kind of let the team run with, you can do that, and they're terrific, but you're locking yourself further and further into that cloud if you do so. Another very tactical example of cloud lock might be asymmetric cost models. So a cost of getting data, let's say it's a large database, moving data into this environment may cost one thing, and getting it out may be 5 to 10 times more expensive per quanta of storage, right, whatever that measure is. Very, very important to understand those dynamics, because those are quite simply meant to make it harder to leave, right? They're a retention mechanism, almost a forced indentured servitude kind of thing, because you're stuck there. It's going to cost you, it might have cost you $100 to get in, now it's $10,000 to get back out. Keep in mind how those look, and that could be data transmission asymmetrically provisioned that way. It could be just storage, right? Storage traffic in and out of a storage environment. Ask about those things. What's it look like getting in, and what's it look like getting out? Question number 8. What's the best way to evaluate multiple providers? we get this quite often in our cloud workshops. It's a good time to be getting into this space because you've got terrific choices from the diehards like Amazon, but Azure is coming on strong. Google is quite capable. Bluemix from IBM. So there's quite a few players out there now, and they all have their pros and cons. What's the best way to evaluate those? Certainly cost would be something that would be important, top of mind, I think, for most folks. Capabilities and features certainly in there as well. What does the support mechanism look like? Those are things that you've got to nail down per provider. And again, we can, at GTRI, we can help you with any of those criteria. Even more broadly, I would say this is probably less of a snapshot in time evaluation, though. This is something that if you fast forward 18 months as you're getting into a cloud strategy, you want to be able to do this on a real-time basis. So at any point in time, you want to be able to say, okay, for this application, what makes sense for it? And recognize that when evaluating something like cost or features or performance, it's very workload specific. So while Amazon might be great for application A, it may be costly or poorly performing with respect to application B. And maybe that's better suited for a different cloud infrastructure. So not all clouds are created equally, and having flexibility up front and building that into your approach through tools is, I think, a very wise investment up front, and it's going to save you just enormous headache on the back end. Question number 9, is cloud an all or nothing proposition? And this is a question that we find people come to maybe an hour into a group discussion, right? Because there's sort of a black and white that comes out of the conversation sometimes. But from our perspective at GTRI, we believe that this is not an all or nothing. There's a terrific and appropriate fit for cloud, both the infrastructure as a service or platform as a service cloud offerings, as well as software as a service. They all have a role. And we also believe that certainly still today, for most organizations, there's probably still a place for private cloud as well. Not in every case, but in many cases. So really it's about how do I come up with a strategy that embraces all of them and lets me consider them not on technical criteria, but more on business outcome criteria. What makes the most sense? So hybrid cloud in that regard is something we strongly believe in. And if you listen to IDC or Forrester or Gartner, they will all tell you the same thing, right? That certainly for the next horizon, and that would be 3 to 5 years, hybrid cloud is definitely the mainstream approach. If we look beyond that, it's quite possible that hybrid quickly gives way to totally giving it up to public and other clouds out there, and on-prem becomes a thing of the past, but not probably in the next few years yet. And again, we mentioned SaaS. Don't forget about software as a service. And from my perspective, that is, again, the best place to consider software as a service is for necessary and potentially critical applications that don't differentiate you among your peers. So things that are really important but aren't going to make you more profitable or more competitive, but they are essential. So email, a human resources system, a learning management system, those are all easy targets to pick off as a software as a service opportunity. And then finally, before we open up for some questions, question number 10, are there contractual kind of concerns? Are there T's and C's that we should be watching for as we go forth in a cloud model and evaluate cloud as an option? The answer is obviously yes, there are. And what are those? Well, total cost of ownership would certainly be one. The appeal of kind of teaser rates and teaser arrangements can get you in, get you stuck, and then that's when some additional costs may come to bear. just be cautious of that. Understand what this is going to look like over the long haul when you do your costing evaluation. Be wary of things like overage charges or extraneous utilization charges that may be just come from the fact that people are very good at turning environments up, but often forget to go back and turn them off when they're done. So kind of leaving the lights on. If you do that, what is that going to look like? And is your cloud provider going to help you find those things, or do you need tools to help find those things? That's a whole economic model that has its own set of tools in the industry now. Is just being wary of stranded workloads that are out there churning up expenses in clouds. Understand what the service level agreements are that your provider's offering. Ask about those. Hugely important to know what they're on the hook for, what they're not, how long things like outages are permitted to last, and what the recourse is. Is it simply an insurance policy where you get a rebate off your next bill? If indeed that's the case, then the greatest SLAs out there are meaningless if the impact would cost your business, 100-fold in terms of the penalty dollars that you're getting back from that. So as obvious as that may seem to some, understand what the recourse is related to SLAs. And we already touched on it briefly before, but another thing to consider in the contractual side is around data sovereignty and location of data and location of stored information relative to local regulations. Understand what those are and understand how the contractual pieces in your arrangements can impact those negatively. All right, with that, I'm going to open up for a few folks here, and just let's see here. And actually, let's see. I don't know if any of you are actually on the audio. I can't tell if you're actually on via the telephone, but I'm going to unmute you now, and if you want, chime in with a question. All right, I've brought everyone in. It doesn't look like anyone's got a phone connection, though, if I just look at my icons here, looking through, scrolling down. So if you'd like, I wanted to leave some time for Q&A, but if you'd like, just post a question in the Q&A window or the chat window, and you can find that up at in the WebEx panel there, off to the side. And often in these one-of-many events like this, folks don't necessarily find it the right forum to speak up, so I understand that. And if you'd like to follow up with me separately with questions, happy to answer those as well. All right, quiet group today. Well, that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and give you back 11 minutes of your day, and we genuinely appreciate you taking the time to join us today for this brief discussion on questions to ask during your cloud workshop. And as I have plugged a couple times, GTRI does facilitate these cloud workshops on a regular basis with our customers. So something that you're interested in, quite genuinely, I don't know that we bring, we're not bringing any magic into the room, right? We probably have very smart folks in the organization. One of the most valuable things we can bring, though, is a facilitated discussion, our own experience, our knowledge and expertise. But, we're also nodding to the fact that we have a lot of smart customers out there, and we can offer help in the form of facilitating a broader conversation with a larger audience. So get the stakeholders in the room and help uncover the similarities and differences in thought and get everyone aligned on the same page, and that makes it a whole lot easier moving forward and ends up with much greater success on the end. So with that, I would say if you are interested in the cloud workshop, just reach out to myself. My contact info was provided at the start, or your GTRI account executive, and we'll gladly follow up with you. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great day.